They waited. Kalki sat outside his home for a while, drifting into an uneasy sleep. He was tired. Arjun was leaning against the tree whose canopy shadowed their hut. He was playing with a coin, flipping and twisting it in the air, out of mundane curiosity. Lakshmi was reading a book, and Arjun kept trying to peek into it. Bala was busy cleaning his make. Sumati had scolded Kalki to be more respectful towards adults, and not barge into a council meeting just because he was able to convince them once. He was enamored by the idea that the avatar of this age was doing all of it. Did Lord Govind allow himself to do all this? But then he was a man who loved curd and stole it. He had his own likings and flaws, just like Kalki, whose greatest flaw was his verbose nature, which often made him forget about his surroundings. Shuko appeared on his shoulder, and he let him have a piece of bread. After a while, when Shuko had occupied himself with his dietary fastidiousness, Kalki realized Kripa hadn't come. He was the one who had suggested making weapons out of natural forest resources, and yet he hadn't come. He was an acharya, yet such lack of punctuality hardly suited him. There was a tale about a mleccha, who was a noble one from the times in Mahayuddha. He wanted to be a great archer, and he had the talent for it. The respectable Acharya realized that he was a threat to the hero of the age, and he made the mleccha give his thumb in return. Without the thumb, the mleccha was no more a good archer, and it was this tragedy that cost him his love for archery. Kalki knew that the Acharyas weren't the noblest of men, even though they pursued noble practices. There was never really good or evil in this world. There were just people and their choices that lead to devastating consequences. The story was APT, and it was the only one Kalki remembered from his Gurukul days. It made him wonder now whether Kripa was a good man after all, for his intentions were often belied by his actions. Kalki was a bit surprised as to why Kripa had not divulged the names of either his nephew or the accomplice. He thought to himself that perhaps the time was not right, and eventually he would receive answers once he had definitively chosen the path of righteousness. I don't think anyone is coming, brother. Arjun began with a hint of humor. I suppose your speech wasn't really that impactful. Were you impacted? He probed Bala. Bala had been wiping the make when he got sidelined. Ah, what? Ah, yeah. Kalki shook his head in dismay. I'm not surprised my own people don't trust my judgment. He coughed for Lakshmi to look up from her book and answer, but she remained still, merely flipping through the pages. Great, thanks for the encouragement. She still didn't say anything. I don't think she's listening. Lakshmi snapped without even glancing up. I am. I just choose not to answer. Makes me feel good. Everyone, thank you. Kalki sarcastically shook his head and swiveled to face the direction of the forest. Then he saw a person walking towards him. He wasn't exactly tall, more average in height and build. Roshan Mitra was walking alongside, sluggishly moving forward with him. While often dismissed by most people as weak, Kalki had seen him loading and unloading sacks in his father's farm during periods of harvest. The chit of a man had a surprising amount of strength. Is this where I volunteer? Ah, sure, yes. Kalki stood up. How can you help us? I can help you with making weapons. Do you know how to make weapons? Roshan shook his head. Someone needs to teach me, but well, I'm a quick learner. That's great. Kalki turned to his friends, who were struggling not to laugh. And you won't fight? No. Mother said I shouldn't do something to kill myself. Oh, I see. Kalki smiled. Well, thank you for coming, Roshan. Hold on. A voice shouted. Kalki turned, and he could feel all the heads turning as well. It was Leela with her two brothers, along with Sagar, Maya, and 10 more friends. But they weren't just 10. They were in hundreds if Kalki was correct. They were coming in large groups, excitedly chattering about this opportunity to go against the Panchayati dictum and fight against the tribal audacity of demanding to excavate their temple. Lakshmi had closed her book. Bala straightened himself. Arjun wasn't playing with the coin anymore. I hope this is enough, Kalki, Leela said with a smirk. She had onyx black hair, with curled eyelashes and a thin mouth. Her brothers didn't look anything like her, but they were tall and strong, and Kalki needed that. This is more than enough, and a thank you for coming. Kalki lowered his brows as he acknowledged all of their presence. But how did you manage to convince everyone? He asked Leela. Me? I didn't manage to do anything. I was bringing my brothers along when I saw this group. They were all coming this way. So who grouped them? Well, Leela signaled with her thumb at the back, towards a familiar face that appeared from amidst the crowd. Clad in plain white clothes, Devdatta looked at Kalki with a generous smile. He gave an acknowledging nod. Sarpanji, he gasped. He had never believed that the old man, whom he had called a coward indirectly, would step up and bring so many people for Kalki. I thought you didn't believe in me. Devdatta sighed. I don't know what to believe in anymore. But I do know one thing. I will regret my entire life if I let those Tiavanbialis invade our temple. I don't have a lot to regret, so I hope to make the most of it. Kalki laughed, along with Arjun, who patted Kalki's shoulder in respect. Lakshmi held his hand, their palms brushing against each other, and Kalki felt the same current zapping inside him, as on the day of his father's last rites, when Lakshmi and he had almost kissed. Kalki even managed to see Sumati, who had come out due to the commotion and was greeted by so many people. She was silent, but was grinning with delight and awe. Devdatta pulled out the scroll, lifted it up in front of Kalki, and tore it apart, flinging it in the air, definitively letting the congregation know that a choice had been made. And now Kalki had to steer them towards fortunate consequences. Arjun had spoken the truth when he had said that it would be difficult to handle so many people, as Kalki didn't know anything about warfare. They had sat in Kalki's house as Sumati brought for them some curd and milk to feast upon, while the 100 or so volunteers had returned after announcing their partnership. I can teach them to hold a make. Bala rushed through the curd as he said so, devouring mouthfuls of it. They will be warriors. A make is too heavy for an average man, Kalki said. Not all of them will be taught one thing. We need to divide them up skill-wise, Lakshmi said. See what each person can offer, and give them the desired role to play in this battle. They are all shambulans. Most of them will choose the road of non-violence. Kalki stood up, angsty and exhausted. Morning had arrived, and none had had any sleep, for time was of absolute importance. We were able to attack the mlechas, for they were small in number in comparison to the volunteers we had that time. Even 100 of us won't be enough for a tribal army. Wars? We don't even know how the tribal army operates. Our folks need thorough training, and we need to make short work of it. Arjun nodded, his fingers dancing on his lips, as the sheathed sickle dangled from his waist. He had said he received the weapon from their mother, which had only made Kalki jealous about not receiving anything from her. He shouldn't have felt that way, but envy was a childish emotion, more so because without the aid of Soma-induced strengths, Arjun was in greater need of the weapons than Kalki. It was all getting over his head. The fact that so many people had posited their faith in him, had believed in what he would be able to achieve for them. It was hard for a boy of his age. He wasn't an older person, ready to take the responsibilities of his life, let alone the lives of the entire village. In the field of boundless courage, he had mustered up words that had instilled hope in the average villager's eyes, but that didn't mean he'd necessarily win. Would he? How? The thought of pessimism had crossed his mind, and that was one of the major reasons why he wouldn't sleep until he proved everyone right and became the hero Shambhala deserved right now. Right after finishing his cup of milk though, we need a guru, Arjun said. An acharya. I can contact Guru Vashisht for his help, but he'll probably reject us, for he has opened his doors to a lot of wanderers out there. And even if he accepts, coming from there to here would be just as problematic, and time-consuming. And time is exactly what we lack right now. Guru, Lakshmi had her brows pulled down, the way she usually did whenever she was deep in thoughts. I agree. The raven will drop the message to Kali's office, and according to my estimates, as they prepare an army and all, it'll take him a maximum of 10 days to gather and travel here. Why so much, little girl? Bala huskily asked. Lakshmi glanced at him, wide-eyed. Kalki knew why. She wasn't really fond of being called a little girl since she was quite old. Lakshmi was the one person he knew who hated being a child, unlike Kalki who missed how everything was innocent back then. Yeah, because well, Kalki and I traveled in a day and a half as we were less in number, but for an army, which will necessarily need rests and stops, it would require more time. 3 days of journey would be the minimum amount of time required. Arjun added an inquiry. How will we know when they appear? Parrots can fly high and see incoming intruders. Bala exclaimed. Parrots are intelligent if used rightly. Everyone except Kalki watched Shuko, who had curd smeared over his beak. It flapped its wings and noisily squawked. Kalki's body stiffened. I know someone who can help us, but he's not really the most trustworthy man around. In fact, you two might know him. He signaled over to Bala and Arjun. The only person we know, Arjun began, narrowing his eyes and then broadening them in horror. Oh no, please don't say it's him. Unfortunately, yeah, Kalki nervously laughed. Arjun struck his hand against his forehead, while Bala was still musing thoughtfully about it. He looked like a sadhu. Sadhus were usually the wandering priests, having no prescribed religion that they believed in. They didn't have a temple like the priests, nor were they looking for materialism. They had eschewed worldly affairs. They would remain dirty and forgotten, persisting with their nomadic existence. Strongly resembling a sadhu, Kripa was leaning against the rock. There was a peaceful smile dancing on his lips, and his hands were wrapped around his torso. Kalki and his friends walked onto the scene just then. They were met by the image of a haggard drunkard, his head lolling against the ground, who was surrounded by innumerable empty cups of sura. Kalki knew his friends wouldn't trust his judgment in this matter, but Kripa was the only hope he had since he was much more than an ordinary acharya. He was a Chiranjeev, who had played a pivotal role in the Mahayuddha and must have innate knowledge about weaponry. All of this wasn't known to his friends, and he wished the gods didn't know it either. Must say, Kalki, you really believe anyone who says he's a guru, right? Arjun said. I'm sure Kripa could be a good enough guide in knowing what's out there in the woods, but I'm not sure if he can help us fight an army of Tiavandialis. Lakshmi grunted. Yeah, just look at him. Look at this egregious man who just, bah. I can train our people better, Kalki. Give me a chance. Bala busted forth with such energy that he shook even Kripa, who noisily awoke from his slumber. Am I having a nightmare? Kripa looked around, his eyes pale, with dark bags under them, his mouth grim and foul, and his hair all twisted and greasy. Why do I see so many imbeciles in one place? Kalki shook his head. He shouldn't say anything deplorable and let the situation worsen. Are you an acharya, old man? Bala grabbed Kripa and pulled him up, shaking him furiously. Are you? Can you teach us, old man? Kalki came forward and forced Bala to release the Chiranjeev, as he tripped and struggled on the floor, reeling. Yeah, I will just tell what I know. He was once a guru, but he got addicted to suras until he forgot what was right and what was wrong. Now he's just a wanderer, a hermit, a drunken one at that. Lakshmi grimaced. Kripa looked sheepishly at Kalki and then at everyone. What are you all prattling about, mates? Why in God's name are you disturbing my morning slumber? Have I not had enough of you? We need your help. Kalki came forward, eyeing him hard. You told me in the meeting we could make weapons out of the forest. We need your help in training and crafting armory for the battle that is about to begin in 10 days. Is he for real? Kripa squeaked, asking Kalki's friend. In 10 days, You'll only get half a warrior, and not a good half, if I am honest with you. I don't care. That'll be all right for me. Kripa watched him in confusion. You really are serious about it, mate? That's good, We should all be merry about heroes, and hope it will make us win a battle. But then why should I do what you want me to do? Because it's the right thing to do, Lakshmi responded grimly. Right thing? Yes. Well, how should I respond to this in a genteel fashion? Lass, the right thing is for those who have morality. And unfortunately, I lost mine a while back. You supported me in the meeting. I thought you supported that decision. I don't even know what I dreamt about right now, let alone what I said in that meeting. I say a lot of things, but I mean little. Does that make any sense, or should I try some different words for you? Kalki came forward, avoiding his friends. He grabbed hold of the stupid old man and lifted him slightly. We are in need of an acharya. If you do this, I promise I will come with you to meet your mysterious accomplice to whatever mountains you wanted me to go to. Kalki stared at him steadfastly. Mahendragiri, his voice chortled. What? The whatever mountains you had mentioned, you know. Kalki left him, sighing in relief. Yes, whatever. Fine. Kripa brushed off his tunic. I will help you. Kalki's friends weren't relieved, but they were glad. Help was on its way, even though the help was deadly drunk all the time. First, we need to go to the woods and gather supplies, as many as he can. We need milk too. Milk? For war? Arjun asked. Energy, mate. Strength. Milk is health, as they say. You know. Lakshmi interrupted. No one says that. Someone definitely said it. No one, not one person. I'm pretty sure someone had said that. Lass, he chuckled. I'm pretty sure. All right. Kalki snapped in between. Whoever has said whatever should not matter right now. We will do as you say. You must meet our volunteers and select each of them for a specific kind of duty. All right, as you command. Kripa mock saluted him. Kalki began to walk with him, while his friends followed them. When Kripa whispered a gentle statement, you and your brother have vastly different ways of persuasion, mate. I need to be careful around with you both. That's nice. Even your friends seem gleeful around you. But you see, to become an avatar, you might have to make sacrifices, so enjoy this while it lasts. And he walked off, Kalki trailing behind him, with a dazed expression on his face. Placidly lying down on his bed, Kali had never felt so useless in his life. He had promised himself he would rest when death would be near, not before that, for resting meant sparing time for innocuous pleasures. Kali was suffocating, and not because of all the dirt that had accumulated his lungs, but because he was stuck in a room, just as his sister was worried about his well-being. Where was she anyway? He asked himself, as he worried about not having seen her for an entire day, though that could be a blessing in disguise. Kali lifted himself up, brushing his legs against the floor, stretching his back. He knew he would die if he remained in the bed for long. He walked to the door to find his two generals standing on opposite sides, wearing their plated suit of armor. They instantly stiffened at the sight of Kali. At ease, Kali said, sighing, even speaking feeling like a huge tax on his throat. Coco timidly said, my lord, you should be resting. I know I should be, but I choose not to. Lady Durukti has commanded us. Kali shot Vikoko a look of pure poison. She didn't meet her master's eyes. Kali realized how small he was in comparison to the twins. They were both more than 6 feet tall, broad and agile, while he was decidedly diffident next to them. I want to travel outside. I want to see how the city is working. All right, my lord. Kali was guided by the twins outside the fort as he saw the simmering rays of the sun washing over him after the longest time. The twins opened the chariot door for him, which was attached to 2 white stallions. At the sight of his ride, Kali shook his head. I want a horse, and a personal one. The guards around the fort stood shocked. The twins walked forward, incredulously. Coco began, my lord, This is better for your back. I don't want to be protected anymore. Kali patted his general with a warm smile, hoping to make him understand his plight. I want to breathe in the fresh air as I ride through the streets of the city. The twins didn't quarrel much. They brought him a horse while he waited, watching all the guards. It was only his fort where the Manavs, Rakshas, Yakshas and Naga soldiers were together, for he allowed every capable warrior to be appointed. He didn't let prejudices dictate the professions they were engaged in. There was a small garden in between, with a statue of Kali and Durukti in the center, flanked by trees on both sides. The officials of his government were walking casually, going about their duties. When they saw Kali, they bowed down to him, and he waved with a grin. The horse appeared in front of him. Kali sat on it, feeling powerful like before. He was clad in black, wearing his metal armor over it. He had a small cloth wrapped around his neck, red in color. He pulled it up to his mouth, partially hiding his face. It was for security purposes as well as to protect his lungs. The horse galloped forward, leaving the iron gates behind and making way to the city. The twins were in the front, and two guards were leading the rear. Moving after a prolonged period of inactivity, he was assaulted by the various sights and smells. The bazaars were operating in full force, while the merchants and the customers noisily haggled. Everywhere, people parted and quietened in deference to Lord Kali. They were all whispering and quivering, some in fear, while others had a look of delight. The bazaar was his brainchild, conceived as an open wholesale market, where traders and vendors from the entire northern province could congregate with their wares. They would be taxed at 40% of what they would earn, but it was worth it. He could see books, food and utensils being sold in different lanes. The shops were constructed in narrow spaces, covered with brightly colored canopies overhead. Kali came off his horse with his guards in tow. Kali signaled them not to follow, except for Coco and Vikoko, who went wherever he went. He entered the bazaar and made his way. Some were so busy negotiating prices, they didn't notice the new commander of the city walking past them, but Kali showed no haste in portraying himself as someone like that. He chose to show he was an ordinary man. His arms were sprawled wide, as his eyes fell upon an old lady sitting behind a table. She had a lot of cards on the table, with multiple gemstones over each pair of cards.